How is the First Amendment different from the rest of the Bill of Rights? We'll find out next on the Constitution Study.
There's one thing you have to know wherever you make your stand. Came from a long through line of everyday Americans.
Hello there, everyday Americans. Paul Engel with the Constitution Study here, where we read and study the Constitution and teach the rising generation to be free. You can find out more about what we're doing at the website. Comes up right here, constitutionstudy.com. Read my articles, watch the videos, listen to the audio, find out where I'm going to be. That's the best place to find out what's going on with the Constitution Study. Just to let you know, I've got a couple conferences I'm going to be at. So if you're in Nashville, be out this week, I think, when this publishes, the 28th through the 30th, I will be at the Teach Them Diligently conference at the Gaylord Opryland Convention Center. I'll also be in Clarksville, Georgia on June 8th for the North Georgia Christian Education Conference. If you're in the area, if you're attending, please stop by my booth. I have a booth at each of those. And say hello. Maybe we'll have some fun. Maybe I'll have something interesting for you. You can also follow me I have a mailing list. You can sign up on the website. It's the best place to keep track of what's going on with the Constitution Study as a periodical. I send out a monthly update. I'm not sending out lots of requests and invitations right now. I send out an update once a month, tell you what's been going on and what you can expect in the future. And for doing that, you get a free copy of one of my essays right now. You'll get a copy of Reading the Declaration, where we go through the Declaration of Independence, and you can see where this nation started from, all free just for signing up for the website or signing up for the mailing list. We've talked in the past about the Supremacy Clause. We're going to talk about the First Amendment and the Supremacy Clause. But as we said, we've talked about the Supremacy Clause in the past, which reads, "The Constitution and the laws of the United States, which shall be made in pursuance thereof, and all treaties made or which shall be made under the authority of the United States, shall be the supreme law of the land, and the judges in every state shall be bound thereby, anything in the Constitution or laws of any state to the contrary notwithstanding." We find that in Article 6 of the Constitution. Now, this gets important. Creates a lot of controversy when it's compared with what's called the doctrine of selective incorporation, the idea that the Bill of Rights does not apply to the states. It's based in large part on a Supreme Court opinion called Barron v. Baltimore, where the court basically said, no, the Bill of Rights doesn't apply to the states. They said because that's what the founders wanted, but they give you no evidence that is what the founders wanted. And you know what? Here, we look for the evidence, we look for the documentation. And what's interesting is it actually contradicts directly with Article 5 of the Constitution, which says, the Congress, whenever 2/3 of both houses shall deem it necessary, shall propose amendments to the Constitution, or on the application of legislatures of 2/3 of the several states, shall call a convention for proposing amendments, which in either case shall be valid to all intents and purposes as part of the Constitution when ratified by the legislatures of 3/4 of the several states. Notice that saying, shall be valid to all intents and purposes as parts of the Constitution. You cannot separate the Bill of Rights from the rest of the Constitution legally. It's the same document. Once an amendment is added, that is part of the Constitution, gets treated like any other part of the Constitution. But there is one amendment where the application to the states does not apply. That's the First Amendment. Even though it protects some of our most cherished freedoms, the First Amendment does not actually apply to the states. Why, you may ask? Well, the answer is kind of simple. It's in the language of the amendment itself. See, the First Amendment starts out with, Congress shall make no law. Notice it's focused specifically at Congress. All the other Bill of Rights say, this can happen, that can happen, this can't happen, here are the requirements. But here it specifically puts a limitation on Congress. Now, you may be asking, well, don't each of the states have a Congress? No, not really. They have legislatures. And nowhere in the Constitution is a state legislature ever referred to as Congress. In fact, Article 1, Clause 1, Section 1, Clause 1, the very beginning of the legal language of the Constitution says the legislative power of the United States will be invested in a Congress made up of a House of Representatives and a Senate. See, when we look at the Constitution, whenever the Constitution refers to the legislatures, it always refers to them as the state legislature or legislature of the state. And here you see the examples. I won't read through all of them, but you see the examples of a distinction between Congress and state legislatures. So we see that this specific amendment means Congress can make no law. Its focus is focused specifically on Congress. So does this mean that you have no protections against state infringement on your freedom of religion, speech, press? Well, no. Because if you look at each state's constitution, it includes protections for the freedoms listed in the First Amendment. So your freedom of speech is protected against state infringement by the state Constitution and is protected from the federal infringement by the federal Constitution. Now, you may be saying, okay, why does that matter? What's the difference if it's a state issue or it's a federal issue? And it really gets down to this idea of spheres of authority. You see, we've made everything a federal case. Yes, pun intended. Everything seems to become a federal case. Any complaint, any perceived infringement, it's immediately taken to federal court. Any law someone wants is immediately brought to Congress, it seems. Yeah, there are a few situations where it's brought to state, but everything seems to be going to the federal Congress, to the federal courts, to the federal government, rather than state legislatures. And this puts even more power in Washington, D.C. See, we're asking Washington to mediate for us issues that are not within their power to handle. They were not delegated those powers by the Constitution, by we the people. But yet we're asking them to mediate these situations for us because, well, everything's a federal case. And by asking Congress and Washington to do things they are constitutionally forbidden from doing, we give them more power than they're due. We're asking them to take on illegal power. Now think about that. We're literally asking Congress to take on power they're not legally allowed to have. And then we wonder why Washington is embedded in our lives like a tick on a hound dog. You wonder why Congress cares about every dollar you make and how you spend it? Do you ever wonder why Congress cares about the tags on your mattresses or the light bulbs in your house or the toilets in your bathroom? Because we have given them this power to say, fix this for us, take care of this for us, even though it's not a power they are legally able to enforce. And since we don't pay attention to the law when we ask them to take this power, why should we be surprised when they don't pay attention to the law for other powers? See, by giving Washington powers they are not legally allowed to, we not only empower them over that, we not only make them a tyrannical government over that aspect, we encourage them to take power over areas we didn't ask them to. You wonder why the federal government wants to take over healthcare? Because we've told them you can take care of energy and education and transportation and on and on and on. Why are we surprised when we've asked them to take these other illegal moves? Why are we surprised when they decide to take up some more? It's funny, we allowed Washington to tax our income because we believed someone else would pay the bill. Now, Washington is in every part of our lives because it may involve some sort of income and they may just want to tax it. We decided that Washington should create education standards for the nation. Now, those in power are deciding what to teach our children, including not teaching them about their rights and how to use them or about the Constitution and what it actually says. Now the bad news is this is our fault. before you go yelling at Washington, recognize this is our fault. We asked Washington to do most of this stuff. Then again, the good news is, well, this is our fault. You see, we made this mess, but that also means we can clean it up. But it will take knowing what the Constitution actually says and sticking to it, even if we think we can get more done by going to Washington. Even if we think everybody should follow our lead, that doesn't mean it's a federal case. See, if we stop going to Washington every time someone infringes on our speech, every time the state infringes on our speech, maybe we'll start weaning Washington off this idea that they're in charge of everything. See, it may be a neat short-term fix to say, I'm going to take this to Washington. I'm going to have the Supreme Court look at this because everybody should do this. Yeah, but we forget that once we give them that power, they can exercise it on other things as well. You know, I'm reminded of a quote from Martin Niemöller. Actually, hang on a second. Where'd I go? Boom, boom. There we go. Get my quote up here. First, they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. You see, first, there's a lot of talk about socialism nowadays, but the idea is, first, the government came for one of our rights, and I didn't say anything because it didn't impact me. The same could be said of, first, I gave the government one of my rights, and I didn't worry about it because it didn't bother me. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I just speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Sure, they went for one group, then they went for another group. Then they came for the Jews. They came for another group, but I didn't care because it didn't directly impact me, and I never thought about the rights of my fellow citizens. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me because we have turned all of our rights over to a federal government, and we've failed to put any restrictions on them. We failed to enforce the laws and rules we put over top of them. Not that Washington failed to enforce it, which they did. We failed to enforce it. We failed to hold them accountable. We didn't, we let this genie out of the bottle. We opened this Pandora's box, and we continue to pull stuff out of it and then wonder why things keep getting worse. The reason I went into this particular topic about the First Amendment and the Supremacy Clause wasn't to get back into the question of the Supremacy Clause. It's to bring back to our minds an understanding that not everything is a federal case. Every infringement on your rights is not a federal case, and every infringement on your First Amendment rights doesn't need to go to federal court. Let's go back to the original intent of the Constitution. Let's look and say, is this a federal law that's infringing on your rights, or is it a state law infringing on your rights? If it's a state law infringing on your rights, then learn your state constitution, learn what it says about freedom of speech and freedom of the press and freedom of religion, and go to the state courts and deal with it there. If the state courts don't deal with it, then it's time to deal with the state legislature. The power structure is backwards. The federal government is supposed to have the least power of any government. Why do we keep giving them more? Because that's what we've been taught. Because we misunderstand the Supremacy Clause, and we don't take the time to think about what the language of the First Amendment. So we immediately run to the federal courts to fix a problem that's not their job. And they're overloaded with all of these cases, many of which probably are not within their jurisdiction. But we keep bringing them to them because we don't pay attention to what the Constitution actually says. And maybe then, if we did things more in state courts, then if New York or California or Illinois wanted to do something crazy, something you don't like, it wouldn't bother you so much because they'd be doing it in their state legislature and in their state courts, and it wouldn't impact Florida and Tennessee and Georgia and Virginia. Wouldn't it be nice if the laws in California didn't impact Nevada or Oklahoma? If when New York does something stupid, it doesn't bother the people who live in Pennsylvania? or North Dakota. See, that's the thing is we've lost this concept of federalism, of a union of states. And that's why I brought this up. That's why I spent some time in this. So I hope it made you think for a minute. I hope it made you stop and say, well, wait a second. You're right. We think of every infringement on the freedom of speech as a federal issue. Maybe it's not. Doesn't mean it never is, but maybe it's not. Hope made you think about the Bill of Rights and the Constitution and realize that, oh, Congress shall make no law. So what happens when a state school board infringes on your freedom of speech? See, the thing is that there's a lot of information, and when we take the time to actually learn what the Constitution says, you can find out more at the website, constitutionstudy.com. If you like this, post a comment. Let me know. Ask a question. If you have a question about what, go up there. There's a tab, ask a question. I love questions. I put them at the top of the list of the stuff I'm working on. You can also follow me on Facebook and YouTube. Comment there, like there, follow there. I try to follow up with those as well. If you're going to be at one of the conferences I've mentioned, or if you head to the events tab and you see I'm going to be somewhere, not only, come over and say, but tell me you listen to the podcast and tell me what you think. I love that feedback. I love knowing what's on your mind and what you like and what you don't like. And I'm trying to improve this. I added video because I thought it would be a useful tool, and I hope you enjoy it. I hope it helps. And I want to close out with a thought here. See, if you read the Declaration of Independence, our founding fathers closed that with a pledge. They pledged their sacred honor to establish a new nation. I think it's time we start honoring them by learning how that nation is supposed to run, how this union was formed, what the rules are, what the spheres of authority are. Honor them by actually reading the documents that they wrote, rather than just wishful thinking or following those who are just looking for folly. They have an emotional reaction. They run to this. Let's not do that. Let's honor the men that pledged their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor to give us our liberties. Let us honor those who have bled and died to protect our liberties. Let us honor them by knowing what they are, by recognizing those rights, by protecting them, defending them, asserting them, and teaching them to the next generation so they can honor them as well. Let us pledge our sacred honor to studying the Constitution and to teaching the rising generation to breathe free. And if there's anything else, I think that would change not only our nation, I think it would change us and change our lives. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. Again, comment, question, most of all, check me out the next time on the Constitution Study.
There's one thing you have to know wherever you make your stand.